My name is Geras, and this is on ubiquitous language virtual machines, or maybe a better title would be why I don't want a testing framework or another testing framework. Because really, I'm not even sure I have the right definition of virtual machine. I just wanted to emphasize that I don't want a testing framework. And hopefully I'll tell you why in 5 minutes or less. So we've already heard about the ubiquitous language, the verbs, the nouns, the states, and the combinations thereof, and stringing those things together so we can have verb-noun combinations like create customer or generate invoice. And we can have noun-state kind of combinations like good customer, bad customer. And we can kind of code those up so that those are keywords and string them together and have an environment that can actually run those strings of those things together. I think we could do that with water. We could do that with other languages and other environments. It's kind of a style of testing that you could, test automation that you could follow with the existing tools. It also kind of invokes a role of a language designer. That is, someone who can facilitate the conversation between the end users and the developers, not necessarily to be in between them, but to facilitate their conversation with some kind of common language, common terminology. And that's certainly, I've heard invocations of some of that philosophy before. There is that knowledge-sharing aspect that Brian also brought up earlier as well. So why VM? Like, why a virtual machine, and why not a testing framework? Well, those language designers need a place to play. And for me, that kind of invokes some images of a place to register those verbs, register those nouns, those states, register those combinations of those things, and actually give them a place to order those things and to move them around and to work with them that way. And also, so that's one part of that virtual machine idea. The second part is to get those things, when they are put together in a sequence, to get them to run either at full speed, so you can actually watch it running, or at what I would call a hyperspeed, so you can, for example, generate a year's worth of customer invoices within a few seconds, something to that effect. And we also need them to run, as Ward mentioned in our first workshop on this, was we need it to run in kind of interrupt mode, or kind of some kind of mode where we can inject context as the test is going along, almost in support of a semi-automated exploratory testing. So we can be running a sequence and then halt it, interrupt it, inject some other kind of situation into the scene, and have it continue and see what the net effects are. That's where I started to think of this virtual machine kind of metaphor. So it kind of brings up this idea of, again, something that Bob Martin mentioned in a tweet. I think it was to Brian, but I'm not sure who it was to exactly. I can't remember. He mentioned that something about a protocol is needed. And again, kind of back to this virtual machine metaphor, there's the expression of the test, which is communicating to this test context that I'm talking about, which is communicating with the system that's under development or under test. And there is a protocol between each of those three little bubbles. And what exactly is that protocol? And that's one of the things that I'm hoping for this workshop, is that maybe there's forget about the expression of it. Well, not forget about it, but that's maybe secondary to what's the protocol to talking between the expression of the test and this testing context that we can interrupt, that we can run at full speed, that we can run at hyperspeed. Something that, at the end of the day, supports test-driven development as a development strategy, supports test last, verification and validation. Since we all know that we always do both of those things, it's rarely that we do just one of those things. There's also exploratory testing, as I've mentioned. And then there's also simulation. This is something that Gerard mentioned a long time ago, is that they were running the system kind of on top of a fake or a mocked-out database. So that they were really not running the actual system under test yet, but they were simulating running the system under test and learning from that. So I kind of think all four of those modes are kind of needed. Test-driven, test-last, exploratory, simulation modes. And we need something to hold that all together. And so that's why I don't really want a framework for running automated tests as much as support for this testing context. That's about it.